this person is angry, and this person feels taken advantage of, and this person is frustrated. And we would say, okay, I know how to think about that. Because in any organization, one way to think about the structure is the interplay between the rules and the resources. And so maybe what we need to do for your organization is to rethink the way you've structured these rules, and to give some flexibility so that there can be an adaptive structuration or a flexibility based on the resources that are available. Or maybe there's inadequate resources. Maybe there's just nobody with the skill set in the group that's available. So maybe you have a resource problem and not a rule problem. Well, what did our theory do? It gave us a way to describe and explain what's going on and to predict what will happen if we have too rigid rules or not enough resources. And the recommendation is to work on resources or work on the rules so that we can get done what we need to get done in this setting. Right, so Laura, that's kind of quick and to the point, right? You'd want to make some examples from the book or examples from your journal articles to say, well, here's another example of where this happened. Or here's with the Caterpillar Corporation, they tried this. Because that gives ethos to your argument. That gives validity to your argument to say, well, the Caterpillar Corporation did this, or the A.W. Gore Company did this, or Exxon discovered this.
So for your journal, you can kind of write like things that you witness. It's kind of like almost how it is every week, except there's maybe just like a lot more, like you said, ethos backing it up.
Yes. The journal articles are built around the idea that you begin to look at things and use this language to describe them. Yeah. So it's supposed to all work together. It doesn't always do that, but it's supposed to all work together. So yeah, you wouldn't say, well, Marshall Scott Poole has this adaptive structuration theory built on Anthony Giddens' work in England and sociology. They don't care about that. But they like the idea of some language that describes it, and you talk about how that language interacts. And you've got to go back to Griffin, sort of, to get some of this language. It's built into Griffin and the journal articles and the other sources that you could read if you find one that you like. But this is like, I think of this with your sororities and your bands, the people who are doing sorority and band things. So those are really small groups. And a lot of things depend on who you get, what they can do. And so if you're real rigid about, well, we're going to have this, and we're going to have that, and we're going to have this, and nobody fits into those boxes, just doesn't work. But if you have a sorority that has a national structure that's imposed on you, that creates tension because you can't meet it. But if you could restructure it a little bit, it'd work fine. So you have to figure out how you're going to work with the formal and informal structure, and are you going to allow for informal structures that are flexible and adaptive, or are you going to require this? Again, most organizations try to live with this tension. They have this to fall back on, but they let this go as long as it works. Right? Prove this is true, right? And they let it go as long as it's working. If it stops working, then they push everybody back into this. But you let the adaptive structure function as long as... I told you the ADP story, the truck guy, and he says they can get things done if they let this flexible structure happen, but as soon as they make it fit the organizational chart, they couldn't get anything done. All right, so this is an example, quick example of where adaptive structuration would come in useful. Okay. Let me do an example from coordinated management of meaning. Coordinated management of meaning is a theory about how people coordinate or work together in communication. So it applies to interpersonal. When we did this, a lot of you reflected on your personal relationships with parents or significant others or whatever. You said, oh, that explains what's going on here. So coordinated management of meaning is valuable whenever you run into people who can't seem to understand each other, who seem to be talking past each other. They're not understanding each other. They don't know what the other person is meaning. I mean, we did the simple example of someone says, "Are you hungry?" And you think they're asking you if you're hungry. But they're not really asking you if they're hungry. They're making a statement. I'm hungry and I would like to stop to eat. Well, it's a failure to coordinate meaning going on. So Pierce suggests that wherever that happens, you should begin to look at things like the episode or the relationship that is present. So if there's been some recent research out about spouses who work in the same company or who run the same business. Have any of you seen this? There's some new research out about this. There's more and more couples, running businesses together. And so they struggle a great deal with when are we talking as business partners or when are we talking as spouses? Because it kind of overlaps, And one of the things that they discover is that they have to be very clear about time when we are in the episode of being business partners and times when we're in the episode of being spouses. What's going to happen if they don't clarify the episode that's going on? Confusion, anger, all kinds of miscommunication will take place. So into that setting, Pierce would say, you need to make sure when you're talking about something, you clarify the episode. What are we doing? Are we doing business or are we doing family right now? Let's clarify the episode. What's our relationship? Are we business partners or are we friends or are we spouses or what's the relationship? And Pierce says that once you clarify that, people will be able to coordinate their meaning much better because they'll understand within what episode and what relationship they're talking from. So what kind of a problem would come to you and you would say, aha, that's a coordinated management of meaning problem?
When there's fraternization going on within a company, like I know, because I work retail, there's a very strict fraternization policy where associates can't hang out with, upper management. But when that does happen, favoritism is involved then.
Right.
And if something's going on, whether, if there's like a dispute between that same manager and associate, tensions are higher just because they have fraternized outside of work.
They've got multiple relationships. Mm-hmm. And so what the company's trying to do is say you may have only one relationship with each other. Mm-hmm. And that will make it easy for us to coordinate the meaning. So it seems to me there that one of the examples, a problem that would come would be where people say, we don't like this policy of non-fraternization. I can say it too, right? Non-fraternization. We don't like this policy, but it hinders, it makes work odd. And you could say, well, listen, here's why it's important. Because you have to be able to coordinate your activity. You got to be able to separate the episode and the relationship. So if you don't like this policy, can you think of another way to make sure that you don't confuse episodes and relationships?
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to be in that type of situation now because I just took a job that, an old job I used to do. I just went back, and one of the managers there is a good friend of mine. We always hang out, drink, whatever. And might be a little weird sometimes because you might be like, oh, do this, and I'm gonna be like, oh, screw you, you know, just because we
Right.
have that type of relationship
Right.
outside the job, but it's like now I gotta.
Yeah, so for instance, in a company that doesn't have a non-fraternization policy, you could suggest, and they come to you and say, it's very weird around here, you know, people are friends and they go out drinking together, but they work together. And you can say, yeah, that's going to be weird because of these things. So people are going to have to learn to be explicit about who's talking to who now, what's the relationship. Yeah, so see what this theory does is it gives you a way to parse it, to analyze it, to sort it out. Yeah, so that's good about episodes and relationships. You know, this is, I think of the band example again too. It's very difficult to give people criticism about their artistic abilities. You know, if somebody plays or sings or paints or writes, and a friend of yours has written a poem or a book, and they come to you and give it to you and say, read this and tell me what you think. You know, or they sing on a recording and they say, listen to this and tell me what you think. You're like, you know, oh my gosh, you know, I'm caught here, you know, because I think it's horrible. I think this is really, I got these things I want to say about it, but I can't say it. So you can use this. You can say, all right, listen, this is kind of weird because we're friends, so I want to say anything you do is good. But do you want, are we talking now as an artist and a critic, or are we talking as a friend to a friend? What do you want here? You know, and if they say, okay, I want an artist to a critic, and I say, well, all right, but then you got to remember that, or else that's not going to work. Give it to someone else. You know, but at least you understand what's going on. So this is hard when bands get together, a bunch of friends, and someone says, I don't like the way you did that. And it's like, it takes personal, you know. So it's a coordinated management meaning problem. All right, another thing that Pierce says is that part of our problem of communicating is stories. That there are all, remember the LUUTTT thing from coordinated management meaning? That there are stories lived so that we're each living out a story. And there are stories that are untold. So there are stories that you don't know, that if you knew it, it would explain why I'm doing what I'm doing. And there are stories that are unknown, which are things maybe back in my family line I don't even know about, but have affected me. If I knew it, it would explain things. There are stories that are unheard. You haven't taken the time to listen to my stories. So what is that? That's LUUU. And then stories that are told, stories that we need to tell. And then there's storytelling. So it may be the case if people say, we're not getting along, I don't understand what's going on. You can say, well, one of the things that we know from communication is that there may be stories that you need to listen to that you haven't listened to yet. So maybe you just need to ask the other person to explain to me some of the things that are important to you, or why this thing is so important to you. You know, it's like criticism of a singer, for instance. If you give a little criticism and they go ballistic, you don't know the story that their whole life, you know, there have been hostile, critical people to them. So you don't know that story. That's an untold story. It's an unheard story. If you heard it, it would explain and help you coordinate your communication with them.
I'll say too, like in terms of, I guess, like episodes and just dealing with people, you know, some people, like anything their parents say, they just take negatively. And, you know, other people, you know, their parents tell them something that's like, okay, well, maybe they're right. Because I guess it's like how you view that person who's giving you the criticism.
Yeah.
If you value them or not. Like a lot of artists will respect someone in the field who's done something greater. They hear their music and they're like really impressed by it. So if they give them criticism, it's like, oh, okay. But if you kind of started out, and you may be right, you may just happen to be right, but they won't really accept your criticism because like when you just started.
Communication is very complicated.
Yeah.
And coordinated management of meaning helps us to see, give one way of looking at it, right? So maybe some of your cases are people who are just can't talk to each other, they don't understand each other, and you could say, all right, and you can mix some recommendations to them with different theories. You know, like this one, you could say episodes and relationships and stories, because that's all part of the same thing. And if you really want to mix two theories, you can, but try to stay on one theory and just work it for that situation. All right, so what I was trying to do there was to take at least 3 theories that we've looked at and show you the way that a theory gives you a handle on doing some recommendations for something. Okay, so let's take some more of your, we won't take the whole time today, but let's get some of your things and some of the theories you're talking about. Pro?
Well, we're working with a fairly large corporation, and I guess I'm a bit confused because I think there seem to be several theories that could easily apply to the situation.
Okay, so you got a corporation, so immediately we begin to think of things like deeds, and we think of things like pool, and we think of those kinds of theories. But have they identified a problem?
So many problems. There's several hornets' nest.
Did you?
Yeah, it's just like, it seems to be the management style that's like dictated from the top down that's really the crux of all of the problems.
Okay, so the top, whatever that is, dictates you will be this kind of a manager. Okay.
Actually, I'm in the same group.
Okay.
What I saw that it was, from what the guy was telling us, it's it's like a dictatorship. And the CEO, he didn't want anyone, like any of his managers talking to any of the other managers. He didn't want a communication.
Okay.
So that way he kind of had all control. Nobody knows anything about what's going on, who's doing what, and all that.
Okay, so
We refer to it as fear-based management by fear.
Yeah.
well, this is obviously someone here talking this way, right?
That's up at the top. I mean, our
He's
client
the guy at the
is
top.
down there.
Yeah, a client is here
Right.
who's saying, all right, in our corporation, here's what goes on. We have big leader who says, you can only talk to me, you can't talk to each other. All right, so in my world of comm, that's called no lateral communication. Now, there is a theory that supports this. There is a theory that says this is right because this will prevent this is not efficient.
What's not efficient?
Lateral communication is not efficient because it will lead to confusion because different parts will not all operate according to the master plan.
Problem is that each of these departments does need to have some interaction with each other.
Okay. So the question becomes, okay, so we want to support an argument for lateral communication. Okay, I'm just playing with the way I'm starting to think about this. Because this person does not have the authority or the power to initiate lateral communication.
He tries
Well,
ineffectively, but he
he's going to end up in problems because they have to do it surreptitiously,
That's exactly what happens.
Right.
All covert communication.
which disturbs the whole morale issue in the corporation and makes an atmosphere of suspicion and all this stuff. All right. So I'm seeing this as a rhetorical issue of making a case to the upper division for the value of lateral communication. So I'm seeing it through the rhetorical lens as a persuasion issue. Okay, go ahead.
In order for the top management to buy any type of an argument like that, it would have to be quantified. Like, how is that going to show up on the bottom line?
Okay. So the rhetorical theory tells us that one of the first things we do is we look at the question of invention, or what are the available arguments that exist for this. If we're going to make a case, we're going to make a speech, we're going to make a presentation, what are the available arguments that exist for this? And in particular, for this audience, we know that this audience values quantifiable data. So we know already that we're going to have to locate quantifiable data. Now, again, let me just jump out of this for a minute and say to you, it could well be that your presentation, this is going to take a lot of work. You may not be ready to do this in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. It could be that your presentation will be coaching these people on understanding how to go about creating that argument. And let them do the background work, because you can do it. There are research articles that talk about the need for this and the way it quantifies out. But I don't know that you have the time or to find it all, Brian.
One thing that I found kind of interesting in the timing was that the CEO died like 2 or 3 days ago. And that was the guy who was running this dictatorship. Like,
He's dead.
Yeah, he just died like
That solved it.
a couple days ago. That's what I'm saying.
Well,
I
not
don't know.
really, because he said it's the whole operation that continues to perpetuate itself. So.
No, he is dead.
Oh.
But that's what I'm saying. I don't know when they bring in something new. How,
Holy mackerel. Well, that changes your...
Just in all fairness,
Yeah.
it's like Centerpoint is a provider for the Yankee organization. They
Okay.
provide the concessions, the food, the merchandising, all of that. The Yankees are their client. So the Yankee organization, he said, is totally dysfunctional. It is a complete dictatorship. It's filled with nepotism, people in positions because of sexual favors done, who have no aptitude for the positions that they're in. And so
A little too much reality going on here, but...
but no, but that's really, it's so massively dysfunctional on both sides, the client
Okay.
and them.
Right.
That's why I said it's really
Okay.
difficult.
All right. Well, let's pause for a minute here.
You're on your own.
No, I got a lot of thoughts, but... So who else is in your group?
Emily,
Right.
Brian, and me.
You have any thoughts on this?
Well, as he was saying yesterday, more than anything, it's about loyalty. Like, there's been people working there for 20 years that he had to fire, even though they were stealing, they were taking money. But he was the one that had to take action because the whole company was being loyal to them. for
Okay.
working there that long.
So this person has some courage in the middle of this thing.
Or naivety.
Or naivete, right. They're exposing themselves to, because systems theory, remember when we did interactional systems? I don't know if you remember interactional systems, we talked about that a system seeks to maintain homeostasis. So anything that comes into the system that disturbs the balance of it will experience sabotage or will experience pushback because it's trying to reshape the organization or the organism or the life. And we talked in interaction, this was Paul Watzlawick and others, that everything is explained by the connections and interaction patterns that go on. So in this setting, you would ask, what are the right places where you can make a change that will ripple through the organization? But that's, again, another another whole theoretical question. So you got a whole bunch of different things you could do.
Yeah, too much.
Well, you just say you could help coach this person on an interactional Watzlawick view of what goes on, or you could help coach this person on how to make a rhetorical presentation argument in favor of a change in the organizational structure.
Yeah, I mean, like you were saying, there were a lot of issues, and I was trying to just narrow it down because there's so many. Like he said, the thing, like dealing with the Yankees, they're very last minute, so they'll put in food orders, they'll overbook rooms, double book rooms, whatever. So we could go in that direction, and how they can deal with the Yankee contacts or whatever, or we can just deal with him because he's in one division. Like it's kind of stuff like that, like merchandising.
Right.
And
Yeah. How far out do you want to go with your consulting and your
his thing?
right?
Or we could do it across the board, like how he can maybe.
Right. Well, you got to make some decision about together what theory, how comfortable you feel with different theories, what you want to do. I mean, I don't expect you to fix the whole organization,
They won't either.
Yeah, you're not going to. Yeah, yeah. That's a nice example, though, you're working with. A lot of things. There's rhetorical dimensions, there's org-comm. We don't have enough org-comm theories developed for you to do this. I think we have 1.5, so far. But Watzlawick says things to you, rhetoric says things to you. Dietz says things to you, but I don't think Dietz is going to go here. No.
It seems like it just might be more effective to zero in on a piece of it.
Right.
And develop it more than just trying to go across the board.
This is my own personal thing. I find that the interactional view, the homeostasis kind of stuff, where you look at the whole system of interactions and then you think about how you can perhaps change the pattern of interactions in a way that will not destroy you and may ripple through the organization. That's a very useful perspective. So that might be more useful, because if this person goes out and makes the great speech, they still could get blindsided and cut down by the systemic reaction of the organization. Yeah. Anybody else have a comment or thought about theories or issues, ways you could deal with the communication issues that are part of this? A network analysis would ask the question of, well, can we trace the flow of information, and who are the nodes and who are the networks, and who are isolates and who doesn't get information in time. You could do that. Hey, you got your work cut out for you. But at least it's interesting. Anybody else want to take their thing apart a little bit? Hey, this is your chance for us to do your work for you. So, nobody wants to do it? Anybody have a theory they're working with they want to talk about?
We do have situations like talking for Pepsi.
Okay.
They have people that go out in stores and build displays, and sometimes they're having a lot of problems with executives coming in and going, no, I want them this way.
Okay.
But people are fine, like, it's backlash, like, don't even leave that stuff alone. Like, they've been taught one way, and then executives are coming in and saying another way. It's like it's a communication barrier between, like senior management and, like, regional managers, they're clashing.
Okay. So a display goes up in a store or place. It's put in place by a designer?
Not as, like, they should kind of show them a picture and what to do. They have freedom to do it, the actual, like, work.
Okay, so this is a more artistic, creative person. And they know something about design. They go out and they make the display. And then the executive goes in and says, I think the font should be different. I think the colors should be different.
It's not like all
all the time, just once in a while, I guess they come in to like push their weight around. More like
Okay.
just come in and
And so they make a change. And this person feels like they're just pushing exercising their weight. Okay. And they don't understand. So this creates tension here, which leads to what?
I mean, it's kind of like they resent, like, when they know they're coming out, it's a lot of stress to make sure everything's okay, but still, kind of resentment. It builds up a lot of stress when they know someone's going to be coming out as well.
Which will lead to poor performance, because if I'm under stress, I have an attitude problem because they're going to come and change it. So I need to know that my view will be honored in this setting. This is a common problem between